What's up, everybody? Welcome to the channel. This week on the Lonely Girls Book Club, I had the privilege of meeting and interviewing a young woman named Sarah Marie Paige. She is not only a very beautiful soul, but she also has an incredible story to share. Her adult romantasy book called Illusion of Stars has just been released, and it's her first book ever that she's published, so that's very exciting. And she also has a really poppin' newsletter. It's been well praised, so just go check that out too if you want to hear some funny stories and hear about her books and all that stuff. She's also been featured in magazines and other podcasts, so check her out on Instagram. I'll leave the link below so that you can follow her. But yeah, we had such a fun time talking, and I loved hearing about her process of how she wrote her books and what she does outside of book reading. So without further ado, let's get started. Hello, Sarah Marie Paige. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm so excited to talk about your new work, Illusion of Stars, before it comes out in like 4 days. 4 days.
Yeah, it comes out on the 16th.
Ooh, are you excited?
I am excited. I'm a little bit nervous to have it out but also really excited and ready to let it go and go out into the world and have it be everybody else's and not just mine anymore. So,
Yeah. Are you, I don't know if I looked this up, but are you considered an indie author or are you under a publishing house?
I am an indie author, so I am not represented by an agent right now. Put everything that you see for Illusion of Stars, I put together myself or commissioned to have put together. So like the cover and book and the editing and all of that. So yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's so cool. I've heard that there's like a lot of opportunities for indie authors right now, but I'm just so impressed that you guys can do all of that and like the things that you've set up for your book and the ways that you've advertised for it. I'm impressed that you do that all yourself. That's really cool.
It is a lot of work, I will tell you that.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Well, my first question for you is, what was the most challenging character for you to write?
Oh, that's a tough one. I will tell you probably Eric. He did not have much of a personality until the third draft. In fact, until the fourth draft, my notes on him, like I knew his backstory and I knew how I wanted him to like work together with Isabel. My notes for the um fourth draft was actually give Eric a personality because he was kind of like a wooden board that would just like pop up sometimes and everybody was shipping Izzy with the wrong people, all of my beta readers in those early drafts. The romance has come a long way, but in the very, very early drafts, they were all like, her and Casper, her and Signy. And I'm like, no, it's her and Eric. And they're like, we're not getting that. So
Interesting. Okay. So, did you find that it was hard to find that character for him? Was he similar to you or different than you?
I think it was, building in the like I knew him and I knew what I wanted to do with him. He just wasn't showing up on the page.
Mm,
So it was, mostly just finding him and building in those quiet moments between him and Izzy for him to, be there and present with her, if that makes
yeah.
sense.
Uh-huh. Yeah. My next question for you is, what character are you most excited for people to meet?
I have a soft spot in my heart for all of them. I
Yeah.
love them all. I think Izzy's a really fun protagonist because she's not like a lot of other fantasy protagonists. And I don't mean that in like that she's not like other girls way, because a lot of times when you're like, oh, she's not like a, she is very much like other girls. She's very like normal. And it's been really fun to watch people relate to her and resonate with her. And, she's not stabby and she's awkward. And it's just like very, very normal. So I am excited for everybody to meet her. I have a soft spot in my heart for Eric, even though he did not have a personality for the first three drafts of the book. Um, I love him. And I have a soft spot in my heart for Signy too.
Yeah, me too. I like yeah, I can see what you're saying. I feel like with A Court of Thorns and Roses being so popular and Fourth Wing and Throne of Glass, those characters are like very strong women and they're like learning how to fight and they're they're just kind of, I guess, independent people that you can look up to. But I really appreciated that you kind of made Izzy more like relatable in an awkward sense because I definitely related to her so much. There's so many moments where I was like, that is exactly what I would say or do if I was in the same situation, right? I don't know. I feel like we all want to be like the baddies, right? We're like, oh, I would totally make those choices if I was in that situation. But the truth is, we probably would all be really awkward, right? We don't really know what to do.
Yeah, yeah, definitely like a little bit, but she tries really hard. And that's, I think,
Yeah.
why everybody loves her is she puts her entire heart into things.
Hmm.
And I feel like it's hard to hate a character who, even though they're like kind of awkward and like, kind of quirky, who like just like throws themselves and their entire heart into things. So,
Hmm. I agree. My next question is, what is the most creative way you could convince someone to read your book?
so I mean, you could make like noodle art from it or like a scene with like noodle art. That's probably
Okay.
not what you were asking, but it's the first thing that came to my mind. Illusion of Stars is about a girl who goes undercover with her super sexy enemy to find and steal his weapon. And tropes are always really fun to use for advertising. I also really appreciate, and hopefully like other people appreciate, like when you advertise like kind of like what to expect with the story. Like, is it character
Mhm.
driven or plot driven? Illusion of Stars is more character driven. And the is it light world building or heavy world building? It's definitely more of a light world building novel. So
Yeah. I also really like the puffins. I'm excited for people to meet them.
I love the puffins too. The puffins were actually kind of a later addition. Like those
Okay.
were not in most of the early drafts. And my friend actually falsely accused me of advertising puffins after I like posted a reel with like a single puffin picture. She's like, puffins are mentioned in this book approximately one time, and you're falsely advertising them. And I was so scared that I was going to be the light lark of puffins. Um, and that people were gonna like want to read this book for the puffins, but there was only one puffin in the entire book. And so I went and I added just like random puffin references everywhere to try and like overcompensate. And then I was like researching puffins one night and I learned like a bunch of like puffin facts. And I was like, I could actually use that as a like I could use that in the book. And so I went and I removed a bunch of the random puffin references and then shaped it into the puffins that we have in Illusion of Stars. So, but that was
Okay.
done like, I mean, yeah, I was doing that like maybe a couple of months before I published it. So the puffins were
Okay.
kind of a last minute addition.
Wow. Interesting. And that's definitely one of the things I've noticed people mention most. So that's
People like the puffins.
interesting. They do. The theme of your book to me is about feeling invisible and struggling to find your self-worth. How do you feel that you found inspiration for that theme? Was it from your own life or from people's stories around you?
Yeah, so I've talked about this a little bit on my socials, but
Mhm.
I'm an attorney. That's what I do for my day job. And when I was a first year associate, my mentor at the firm took me to lunch and he said, I just want to let you know because I don't think anybody else is telling you this. You're not good at legal writing, you're not good at legal research, you're only good at filling out forms. The interns are better at your job than you are. And when they start at the firm, they're going to push you out. And I just remember we went to like the little cafe across the street and I got a salad and I normally like love this salad and I could not eat it. I was like so like just like sick inside and went to the park across the street and like called my husband and was like, I don't know what to do. And he was like, okay, we'll start looking for a new job when you get home, but just like get through the rest of the day. And I had been working on before this happened a book about like it was a witchy manuscript about a girl who runs away with the prince and gets chased by it was a cool book. And I was between drafts for that one. And so I started this other book about this girl who felt like a nobody who wanted to be a somebody because I felt like a nobody and I wanted to be a somebody. And I wrote a lot of the like early scenes and came up with kind of like the concept. And then I put it away for probably a year and a half. I didn't work on it. And the witchy book was giving me trouble. I couldn't make the character arc work with the plot. Um, and so I went back to this other book that I had started, which is Illusion of Stars. And I went back to it because I could really see, the issues with the witchy book was I had a hard time making the character arc work. And I'm like, I can see her character arc like really clearly because I went through that character arc. And so I went through and started to work on that and develop it into the novel that we have now. And so it started out as a book about, not being good enough and finding your own self-worth. I think as it developed, it also developed into an ode to, the people who see in us what we can't see in ourselves because,
Mm,
Eric and Izzy, um, you know, they see each other in a way that nobody else sees, and they look at like the weird parts and the awkward parts and the vulnerable parts and the deep, dark, messed up parts. And they love each other and care about each other anyways, like despite those parts. And or maybe like because of those parts. And I just think about like my own experience and when I was so, you know, not okay from being compared to the law clerks and just felt so bad about myself and all the people who looked at me and they were like, Sarah, you don't suck. And I'm like, no, I do. That's what he said. And they're like, no, you don't. And so it's also like, an ode and a thank you to like those people in my life who
mm,
got me through that.
yeah. No, I think it's important to have people in your life who know you and love you instead of just people in your life that just love you, right? Because the people that know you and love you, they're going to know how to help build you up and know how to help encourage you and, help you mold yourself, right? In ways that you can like trust. And I really like that you were able to write such deep characters in Izzy and Eric where they were able to know each other. And that's what made them love each other. Because I feel like sometimes we can get like a fluffy romance where it's like, oh, you're my mate, right? And not all the time. There's a lot of books out there that are really good. Um, but just like having characters out there that find themselves through knowing each other, that's really helpful. Because I feel like um, we don't always find ourselves without other people in our life, you know? We usually have people around us that help along the way sometimes. Maybe not,
Mm.
but that's how I feel sometimes.
And I think the fated mates trope is like really fun, and that's a
It
really like
is.
common one. I am also a sucker for like I am choosing you, you know?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I took it in Illusion of Stars is, they choose each other. And it's been really fun to like see everybody fall in love with Izzy and Eric in the way that they have. I had one reader who was like the sexiest parts of the book were actually when they were just talking and getting to know each other. And I was like, yeah, I love those scenes too where they are
Hmm.
just, opening up and talking, getting to know each other. So,
Yeah. I like a good fated mates too. I also like though, I had a roommate in college who told me that love is a choice, and sometimes it's just like the choice of like being there for each other, right? It's not always a fluffy feeling. And I like it when characters can show that that choice is always there, right?
mhm.
So I like that. What is one piece of advice that you would give to a young writer?
Yeah, so I have two. The
Okay.
first one is to find a community and like find people who are at the same stage as you and to find friends. Writing can be a very lonely venture because we do it by ourselves, right? You write individually. That said, there is a whole really wonderful writing community out there of people who want to cheerlead and support and champion you. And I can say I would not be nearly as far as I am without my critique partners. So, like Caitlin, I've been writing with her since 2020 is when we started together at the very beginning of the pandemic. And I have other ones that have joined along the way, but they are really the ones who have like cheerled me and championed me and helped me get as far as I am. So my first piece of advice is to find a community. My second piece of advice is to, don't worry about trying to be perfect and getting it right on the first go. Like,
Mm,
no matter how hard you work, you're gonna have things that you want to change and that things that develop over time. And so just write and get the story out, whatever that process looks like for you. So some people are plotters and they come up with a really good outline before they ever put a word to a page. And some people are pantsers where they just write and see where the story takes them. And both methods are totally valid. That said, just write. Progress is still progress, no matter how little it is.
mm, mm. I like that you mentioned that you had, did you have four drafts of this book or was there more?
I did 8.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
yeah, 8 drafts over the course of probably a year and a half, and they were all pretty different drafts.
Mm,
And not that like as you get towards the later drafts, like less is changing. Um, But and the basic story was always kind of the same, where she goes undercover with him, and I mean the ending was always the same. I knew the ending before I even started writing it. I started writing it with 2 scenes in mind. So the first one was the ending. I knew how I wanted it to end, and then the second one is when they get attacked in the ravine. I was reading a medical book and it said, if somebody is shot, irrigate them with a stream of water. But I misread that as stream. So I had this image of this girl pulling this boy into a stream because he had been shot. So those are the 2 scenes that I like started with, and those 2 scenes stayed throughout all the drafts. But a lot of other stuff changed. Like, for example, in the first draft, I think Eric just had two friends, maybe. And then in the next one, he had like seven
mm,
friends. That was just too many friends. And so then I cut him back to 2. And, he didn't have much of a personality until the third or fourth draft. the entire second half of the book from when um they return back to, I'm trying to like be vague so if people haven't read the book it's not spoilers. But back when they returned back to the castle through like the swimming scene, like that was all different until like the fifth draft. I tore out like all of that and rewrote like 20,000 words in the book because the ending was not working. And everybody was saying, yeah, it works until we got to that part. And then it was like, Izzy runs around on the beach and takes a nap, is what my friends are calling it. I'm like, okay, we can't have it be like the second part of the novel where things are supposed to really be ramping up, be like she runs around on the beach and takes a nap. So I totally tore out everything that I had and replotted it, changed like every single scene, and except for the swimming one stayed. But anyways, yeah, so 8 drafts over the course of a year and a half. That's my process though, and everybody's process looks a little bit different. But the way that I write is I tend to do like a very like skeletal like first draft, and then it just develops as I continue to work on it, and I'll tear stuff out and put this other stuff in, which is why I've been hesitant to like say anything about the sequel because I just don't know like if it works until I have people like read it and give feedback. So
And if anything's gonna change. Yeah,
yeah.
that's fair. What do you think was the scariest thing in starting the writing journey? What was the hardest thing for you to overcome?
The hardest thing to overcome, I think, is you can also get stuck in like an editing like rut. And so being like, this is good and this is done, and pushing it off. Um, because yeah, it's easy to just keep editing the same parts over and over again and the same pieces over and over again. So, finding and it's hard to with writing too. I am one I like working on like later drafts better once the story is kind of set and you can like start weaving in tiny things. Like for example, the puffins, where it's like, pulling threads through and like doing like little nods to earlier things. It's hard to start from scratch and start from the beginning and start with a blank page. And so I think also starting is the hardest part for me.
Yeah, I think it's the hardest for a lot of people. I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there that would have a book if they could just start, right?
Hmm.
Um, did you have anyone that, like any authors that were inspirational to you during your writing process or even just growing up?
Yeah, so I love B.E. Schwab. I love her, like she writes so beautifully and so poetically, and it's just gorgeous. So I love her writing. Uh, Interestingly, the illusions and illusion of stars, that illusion magic was inspired by the Night Circus. So I read the Night Circus and I was like, I like the illusions and I like them like sexily disappearing on each other. And I realized he does not do that like nearly enough in Illusion of Stars in like the final draft, but he does disappear a couple of times like angstily or like reappear a couple of times in the book. So yeah, the illusions came from Night Circus. I read Spin the Dawn. I think that's by Elizabeth Lim. And I liked they were like ordinary and just had like normal like they worked with the king and queen, but they were not like royalty. They were like, so I
Mm,
kind of like took that concept for Illusion of Stars. So those are a couple of places that I got inspiration.
yeah. I just read I think it's The Fragile Threads of Power from by V. Schwab. That's my first ever experience with her, but it was very well written. I really liked it. So now I have to go back and read. I think it's like The Darker Shade of Magic or something. Okay. So now I have to go back and read that one.
Yeah, I read the first one. I have not read the other two books in the series, but I have read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which is probably her most popular one right now. and Gallant, which is the one that she wrote after Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. And I read The Near Witch, which was her debut.
Okay. Okay. I have Gallant. I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. That book, my friend absolutely loved it, but I just couldn't get into it. It, I guessed the ending like halfway through the book, and when I got to the ending, I was like, "Yep, that happened." So I think that was a little bit of it, is that I had guessed the ending accidentally. So your book was inspired by, it's kind of like a Draco Hermione, right? It's like
Yeah,
if,
Hermione.
yeah, Hermione for people who wanted to get that story in Harry Potter. So are you like a huge Harry Potter fan? How did that come about?
So I kind of fell into the Hermione vibes a little bit, and I did not. So when I was conceptualizing it, I did not conceptualize it as Hermione. But looking back and looking at like Hermione now, I'm like, yeah, it's pretty Hermione. So that's how that came about.
So it just happened. There wasn't any like desire for that.
Not in the beginning, no. I did lean into it in like later drafts a
Okay.
little bit.
Okay, that's cool. I
But I didn't
definitely,
like set out to write Hermione. But
yeah,
yeah, in the later drafts, I was like, oh, they're kind of Hermione. I'll like lean into that a little bit more.
okay. That's cool. I definitely was, because that's one of your like things that you talk about a lot on Instagram. So I had just assumed that that was like one of your main points that you wanted from the book. So it's cool to know that it was in later drafts that that happened. What made you want to write a fade to black fantasy and I guess adult fantasy?
So I think the fade to black, when I was thinking about like the story and the narrative device that I was using, being vague for spoilers, but I'll tell you off recording what I mean. But I think that the fade to black worked best for this like particular story, which is why I kept it as a fade to black. The more practical reason too is that my parents are probably going to read this book, and I'm like, I don't know if I want them to read like my Open Door Spice. So there's that. And then there's also the fact that it just is what I thought that the story called for.
Mm,
Um, and it was either like as I was getting ready to like publish it at the very, very end, I was like, I could put Open Door Spice, but it was either the Puffins or the Open Door Spice, which I realize probably sounds really weird if you have not read the book. But it was one or the other. I don't think that both would have worked, and I picked the Puffins.
okay. All right. I look forward to hearing about that off record. Um, what is one way that books have helped you feel less alone?
That's a good question. So I would say I love the community that comes from like books. So one of my favorite things to do is buddy read with friends. And when I think about, some of my favorite experiences reading, I think about like the times that I like buddy read it with a friend and we were both like squealing and kicking our feet at a certain character or being angry at the same thing. And so for me, it's the books themselves, but it's also, the way that I connect with my friends over them. So
I love that. Do you have a favorite genre that you like to read?
I read a lot of, so the genres that I typically read are like romantasy because I write romantasy, and I read quite a bit of horror, which I realize is not the genre that I write in and is totally different, but I do have a soft spot for horror novels. Um, and then I also read quite a bit of like nonfiction, so writing craft books and business books. Sometimes I'll read poetry and sometimes I'll read like contemporary romance, although I don't love contemporary romance as much. because I just find that I like the magical, like
Mm,
I like the magic and of like fantasy. So,
yeah, the whimsy.
hmm
I like that too. I'm a huge fantasy reader, and romantasy. I honestly don't know what got me into it. Probably my brothers. They're like Lord of the Rings fans. Um, so that's probably what brought me into it was just being around them my whole life.
That's so
Do
cool.
you, yeah, do you have a favorite book?
Oh, let me think.
I know it's hard. It's like
It's hard to pull one off the top of your head because there's a lot that I liked. So I really like, and I've been thinking about this one a lot lately. Um, I don't know if I would say it's my favorite, but it's one that I've been thinking about lately is Star Mother by Charlie Holmberg. I really liked her main character's emotional journey in that book. And I feel like, and the reason I've been thinking about that book a lot is I feel like the way that the emotional journey is told is similar to Isabel and Illusion of Stars, and so that's kind of what like draws you in and like makes it. I binged Star Mother. I read it over the course of like a day. Um, I also really loved the Cruel Prince series by Holly Black. Loved the second one. I think it's Wicked King and Queen of Nothing. I read in 24 hours. I read those two books and I did
Wow.
not sleep, and it's just like a fever dream, but I remember them very, very fondly. I know you said you did not love The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I really liked that one. Um, so yeah, those are some books that I enjoyed.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I think it's important to, you don't always have to agree on books, right?
Mhm.
Great. Oh, I had one more question. What is a piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
So for writing, I think I would say find community and start learning about writing craft faster. It took me about a year. I wrote under a rock without any friends who were also writing and did not know anything about writing in and of itself. So, my first book was That What You Want, and the first draft of that book was um I knew what a plot looked like kind of intuitively, and I knew what a character arc looked like kind of intuitively, but I just didn't know like the theory behind it. And so when I had friends read it and give feedback, they were like, she has like five different character arcs, and you got to focus on just like one. Writing, I always compare it to, your first book you're trying to build a house and you've seen houses before and you've lived in a house and you walked through a house, you know how houses look. And so if somebody were to say build a house, like you could probably like saw off the boards and build something that's kind of like a house, but because you've never like built a house before, the boards are going to be cut in weird places sometimes and you're going to have nail holes in weird places. So the first book that you write is really just kind of like, at least for me, learning how to build a house. And then I learned more about storycraft, and my second books I didn't have as many problems with. Now, that's not to say that is the journey of everybody. Some people are able to make their first books and publish the first book that they ever wrote. So my really good friend Alex, um, Kennington is publishing the first book that she wrote, and she actually got a very large deal from her publisher, and it's very exciting. It comes out in March of 2025. And she was able to, after a lot of drafts and a lot of like rewriting and learning, make her first book into her debut. That was not my journey. And so, yeah, I would say learn more about storycraft earlier. But, everybody's journey looks different and everybody's process looks different. And so I can just speak to my journey and my process.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you, do you, so you said that you would have a community, you would like have a community quicker and start learning about writing craft quicker. That's what you like.
Yes.
Okay. Do you feel like you have enjoyed the writing journey? Have you enjoyed yourself as you write?
Yeah, I will say different days I feel different things towards it. Some days you sit down to write and you're like, my soul just left my soul just left my body and entered the page, and these words are beautiful. More often than not, it's kind of a struggle to get them down on paper. Um, and you just kind of gotta like my process is I write like a very like rough like sketch of like what's kind of going on, and it's really like I'll skip around in the scene and skip like character beats, and sometimes it's just dialogue, and sometimes it's and that part because I'm just trying to figure out what's going on, and like trying to like set like some scaffolding for myself. I don't enjoy that as much. What I
Mm,
really enjoy doing is like sitting down and like once I have that scaffolding set and I know where I'm going with the scene and like what I want to have happen, um, you sit down and you can like kind of flesh it out a little bit more. And that's what I enjoy doing the most.
yeah, nice. So you said that you're an attorney. I'm curious, what made you decide, okay, I need to write a book?
Yeah, so I've always been a writer at heart
Okay.
and wrote ever since I was little. I would sit on my dad's lap and would dictate to him and he would type. Wrote through high school, took a break through undergrad and through law school. And then my last year of law school, there was a writing contest and I entered it and I ended up winning and um, graduated a couple months later from law school and was looking back and I was like, so I was writing this book in high school, and if I had written just like 250 words a day, which is just a couple paragraphs, then I would have written it 5 times over. So I was like, I'm just gonna write 250 words a day and just like see where it goes. And that's that witchy story that I worked on. I worked on that book for probably 2.5 years. So longer than I worked on Illusion. I actually think that the witchy book has some of my favorite like prose that I've ever written still because I just like really worked on like polishing it. But again, I just couldn't make the story work in the way that I wanted to. And ultimately, when people are reading, they're not reading for the pretty language, they're reading for the story and the characters. And then so if that's not
Mm,
working, then the book isn't working.
mm, nice. That's so cool that you just loved that, but you also pursued other avenues. What do you think is besides reading, what is your favorite hobby? I know you have a cat.
I have a cat. I like trolling my friend on Alex on social media. That's always fun. I'll tease her in my Instagram stories, not infrequently. I like spending time with my husband and my cat. Um, writing and reading really take up a lot of my time. So those are probably my main hobbies.
Nice. Yeah, it does take a lot of time. I'm in the middle of a book right now, and it's like it's a good hour and a half a day that I'm reading this book, and it still feels like I haven't even touched a percentage of what I need to finish
Yeah.
for reading it. Well, thank you so much for all of your answers. It's been really fun getting to know you and hearing about your new book. I'm so excited for it to come out on June 16th. It's gonna be so cool.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap. Isn't she such an amazing person? I'm so grateful that she took the time out of her day to be on the podcast. And I would really appreciate your help and support to get her some more help. What has happened is that her Amazon just deleted and canceled all of her ebook pre orders. And so her goal that she had reached, she had actually surpassed her goal, is it's been canceled. So if you could go check out her book, and if you it sounds good to you, I would greatly appreciate it if you would purchase the ebook or a real book, and let's get her back to that purchase count goal. That would be amazing. Let's try to help her out there. Anyways, if you really loved her, I would appreciate it if you would go follow her and check her out and comment on something. If you liked this podcast and the questions that I asked, I'd appreciate it if you would hit the like button to let me know. Maybe comment someone that you would like on the podcast. And it would do me a great service if you would subscribe and hit the notifications so that you never miss an episode. I love you guys so much. Have a good day.